So if you grew up in the 90s, odds are you read or watched Goosebumps or knew somebody that did. Goosebumps for me was just this entryway into horror and scary stories, which was later fueled by other shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark and other books like In a Dark, Dark Room and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Goosebumps was massive during the 90s. I think people will tend to forget just how big Goosebumps was. So not only did they have the book series and the TV show, but there was obviously VHSs, which later turned into DVDs. There was clothing, there was toys, there was school supplies. Like Goosebumps was just kind of everywhere, especially at like book fairs. Like you would go into a book fair, and sure enough, you could buy Goosebumps books. But today, we are not talking about the books. We are going to be talking about the TV show. And we're going to go over my 5 favorite episodes of Goosebumps. So a lot of these episodes, if not all of them, have a part 1 and a part 2. So I'm just going to be combining them together. But enough blabbing, let's go ahead and let's just jump right into it.
Welcome to Dead House.
Coming in at number 5, we have Welcome to Dead House Part 1 and Part 2. So number 5 was actually a toss-up between Welcome to Dead House and A Night in Terror Tower. But ultimately, I went with, obviously, Welcome to Dead House. Even though A Night in Terror Tower is definitely very good and is very unique, so definitely check that one out as well. But Welcome to Dead House is a very unique twist on the ghost/zombie town story trope. It's about this family. They moved to a place called Dark Falls, which is a badass name for a town. I would never move to a town called that, which is kind of the moral of a lot of Goosebumps stories is, hey, don't move into this creepy house, or hey, let's not move to this creepy town, or go to this creepy place. But this family goes there and they realize some weird things are going on with their house, and they also realize a lot of weird things are going on with the town and the town folk. And the town people there, well, their motives aren't really good. Again, it's a super solid episode. I don't want to spoil anything. If you're in the US, Netflix actually has Goosebumps, so definitely check it out if you have Netflix. This episode, again, super solid. The acting is decent, but that's something, just for any 90s kid show. The acting is always going to be not that great. But some episodes, definitely have some really, really good acting. But like I said, this episode is definitely fun. Some unique things that happen, and the effects are pretty solid as well.
Night of the Living Dummy 2.
Coming in at number 4, we have Night of the Living Dummy 2. Fun fact, there actually is no episode for Night of the Living Dummy. It actually starts off with part 2. Which I'm not sure why, because I like part 1, the book, better than part 2. But if you've never seen Night of the Living Dummy or read the books, they're essentially like Child's Play, Chucky, for kids. So it's about this doll who can come alive once you say this little magical voodoo type phrase, which is kind of similar to Child's Play, where he comes alive. Well, Charles Lee Ray transfers his soul by doing voodoo into a doll, then the doll comes to life and tries to hurt people. Kind of the same as this episode. And, well, just Night of the Living Dummy in general. They changed the design of Slappy the Dummy from the book and just to the movie, which I thought was a little weird. I don't really like the design, but it is actually pretty creepy. The design of Slappy is just weird and creepy. But this episode is pretty solid. It has some pretty solid scares. So if you're not into puppets or marionettes or stuff like that, you might find this episode a little bit creepy. Or if you're showing it to your kids, they might find it a little bit creepy as well. But it's overall a pretty solid episode. And don't trust dummies. Don't buy weird, magical, or old dummies from weird people. Moral of the story. But no, super solid episode. Acting's pretty solid as well. Definitely check it out.
Stay out of the basement.
Now, these last 3 are definitely hands down like my favorite episodes. I was thinking about which one I wanted to put first, but I think the order that I have it in, top notch. So coming in at number 3, like you heard, was Stay Out of the Basement, which I can't really compare the story to this to really any other one. Maybe you might be able to like compare it slightly to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it's nowhere near the same. So essentially, these kids are home alone with their dad, and their dad is a scientist, which is a very common theme I've noticed in Goosebumps. Dads are always like some type of scientist, or the parents are. Kind of weird, but okay. Their dad's a scientist, and he does a lot with plants. The mom has to go out of town for like a family emergency or something related to work, and the kids notice their dad's acting really strange and is trying to feed them plant food, and they notice their dad cut themselves and he's bleeding green goo, which is not normal. If you bleed green goo, I mean, you might be an alien or a plant, or you might have a really bad infection. You should probably go see a doctor. But they just start noticing all these really weird things. And the dad is like, hey, you guys need to stay out of the basement or I'm going to kill you. Doesn't actually say that, but he kind of implies that. And this episode is just super good, very suspenseful. And the end has a very unique twist. Or it just has a twist that you may or may not see coming. But it's a super solid episode. I kind of wish there was a part 2, because the way they end it kind of seems like, oh, there could be a part 2 eventually, but there never was. But this episode, Stay Out of the Basement, easily, like I said, is one of my favorites. Definitely check it out.
Werewolf of Fever Swamp.
The Werewolf of Fever Swamp and number 1. I kept debating which one I actually wanted to be number 1, but ultimately I put Werewolf of Fever Swamp at number 2 because there are some flaws with it that just doesn't make it as good as number 1. But Werewolf of Fever Swamp, super solid, obviously. That's why it's number 2. It's about a boy named Grady. Him and his family, they moved to Fever Swamp, Florida, which, by the way, is not a real place, obviously, but Florida is also like a giant fever just land, really. There's some bizarre things that happen here. So if there was an actual place called Fever Swamp, it'd be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Or if something like this did actually happen, makes sense. I get it. But the main character, Grady, played by Brendan, I forget his last name, but he was also in Air Bud, and he was also in Freddy vs. Jason. So he's actually a super solid actor and has done a lot of really good projects as well since this episode. But he meets up with the local town boy named Will, and they just become friends, and Will's telling him that there's a swamp hermit, which is a homeless dude that lives in the swamp, is a werewolf. And then Grady also gets attacked by a wild dog who thinks it's a werewolf, but he decides to keep it, and then things just start happening around their parents' farm. And it's not really a farm, just the animals. So the parents actually are studying these deer to see if they can bring this population of deer to the Everglades to try to help them survive. And they start noticing like animals are starting to die, things are breaking into the deer's like pen, and the parents think it's the dog. Grady is just like, no, it's not the dog, it's not Vandal, which is the dog's name. There has to be a werewolf, because he's hearing howling, and there's a lot of just crazy things that happen. And like I said, Will said, you know, the swamp hermit is a werewolf. So there's, again, something that kind of happens, and you're just like, whoa, did not really see that coming. And it's just really good. Super good. The acting is, for a kid show, very, very good. I have to, give major props to Brendan, who plays Grady. Again, super solid actor. His acting kind of makes like the whole episode. The parents' acting is good. The sisters, whatever. But yeah, super solid episode. The music and just the way it's all put together and just written is just great, especially for a kid show. Creepy, creepy, creepy. I love it. Check it out.
The Haunted Mask.
Now, if you didn't guess The Haunted Mask was going to be number 1, guess what? I was spoiling it the whole time. I can see my shirts is the Haunted Mask. So this episode is honestly one of the best acted episodes of Goosebumps of all time. Like, there's no denying that it is. All the acting is top notch. From like the minor characters, it's just a great episode. Like, I could easily see this concept brought to a more mature audience and like made it like PG-13 or even rated R. Like, the concept for it is just that good. Same with the actors. Like I said, super solid acting. But this episode is about a girl named Carly Beth who is terrified of pretty much everything, which I can relate to because as a kid, I was terrified of everything as well. But she's tormented by Steve and Chuck, who are just two jerks at her school who are always trying to scare her. And for Halloween, she's just like, I'm tired of being scared. Like, I want to get my revenge and scare them. So she comes across this little shop that has these crazy, like, honestly terrifying masks. Like, they're called the Unloved, and in the episode, they're just terrifying. But the shopkeeper is like, no, I'm not selling you these masks, they're evil. And then she comes back, steals them, or steals one, and starts to wear it, but it starts to change her. It starts to change her and make her basically evil and just not like herself. And it's just one of those episodes that actually have like a good like moral to. Like, a lot of episodes are just like, oh, hey, don't move to this weird place, or maybe just listen to your kids. But this one is like, the moral of the story is just be yourself. Like, don't try to be someone you're not, and people will love you. Like, that's all it is. And it's so good. It's so good. There is a Haunted Mask 2, which I don't think is as good. It's not bad. I mean, it's pretty solid, but no, definitely not compared to the Haunted Mask 1. Well, that's my list for the top 5 best episodes of Goosebumps. There's a ton of them out there. Let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite episode of Goosebumps, or even make your own top 5. With that being said, you guys rock, stay rad. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.